So this week our topic is digitality, which Nicholas Negroponte has described as the condition of living in a digitally mediated age. And so you will know already by now that one of the core questions in this course is what happens when our public forum for speech and expression moves from the physical world into the digital world, where most of our speech, our expressive communication happens on servers, happens through social media platforms, and is transmitted through either wireless signals or through broadband channels from one to another. As you know, one of the problems that raises is that speech becomes instantaneous. Under such circumstances, the time, the velocity of speech becomes enormously influential, as we will see. Some of the conditions of living in the digital age as applied to free speech include the following. We now can speak and publish with almost no cost, so that we live in a world in which reporting, observation, publishing, and distribution of our speech is cheaper than it's ever been before. There are still some costs, of course, the costs of hardware and accessibility, but my ability to speak and share my speech around the world is cheaper than it's ever been before in human history. It's also faster than it's ever been in human history. So that we're in a domain where we can claim to enjoy unfiltered, authentic, real-time reporting and expression. And that has interesting implications. We also, as a consequence, have potentially unrestrained access to information. There is more information available to us than has ever been available before. It's easier to find thanks to search engines, and people around the world who might not have had access to basic information about politics or government or foreign policy or food now have access to that information. As a consequence of the ubiquitous access to information, there are new emerging political pressures, social phenomena. People's behavior starts to change. Another consideration is the immediate distribution of content on a potentially global scale. I've spoken about this already a little bit. So if my speech can travel from South Bend, Indiana to Indonesia to Zimbabwe in a matter of seconds, there are important political and moral and ethical considerations that I need to take into account as a speaker, and there are important social and political and moral considerations that my state, the United States, has to take into account as well. There's also a very familiar challenge to this vision of an unrestrained domain of information, and that is to say, filtering. Who is helping us find information? Who is guiding us to speech? One of the ways that we filter all of the massive amounts of information is through search engines, such as Google. Google has an algorithmic structure that allows us to find what we are looking for. And that's the premise of the Google search engine, is that it already knows what we want when we type in our search string. And there are I think what should be pretty clearly, potentially challenging implications there if someone else, whether it be software or other users, are guiding us to speech. Do we want to be guided without knowing we're being guided to speech, or are we happy with that kind of filtering? Those are some core questions for us to consider. There's also, of course, an obvious and potentially very exciting and potentially very damaging phenomenon of anonymous publication. Speaking anonymously is enormously valuable. It allows whistleblowing. It allows me, if I have a secret to tell about the state, it allows me to communicate that content to the world with relatively low fear of repercussion. Right? In so doing, live up to Justice Brandeis's view that sunlight is the best disinfectant. On the other hand, anonymous speech carries with it enormous challenges, such as libel and hate speech. Right? If I can speak anonymously about another race or a person I might be tempted that I dislike, I might be tempted to say something false. I might be tempted to say something defamatory because no one's going to find out that it was me. And that creates interesting challenges for us when we think about creating a democratic community, a community in which all citizens have the same value. Finally, in the digital age, there are enormous costs, but there are enormous benefits. And so we can discover information that we never would have stumbled onto before. We have often unanticipated encounters. We have serendipity, where we meet with something which we would have never met with otherwise, whether it's a form of content or another person. And we also are able to generate or create, through the assembly of different styles of content, of knowledge sources, and so on, new information. So that living in the digital age offers us both the opportunities to be more creative, more influential, and more speech expressive than we've ever been before. It also brings with it certain kinds of political and ethical challenges, so that we manage to continue to create a community of belonging within our democracy.